Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting. The first item is apologies for absence. Can call Mr. Evans, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Rebecca Fogarty, Nicola Furlong, Hayley Gwilliam, Victoria Holland, Paxton Hood-Williams, Alan Jeffrey, Richard Lewis, Graham Thomas and Mark Tribe.
Block, please.
Will Thomas.
Okay,
Oliver James.
thank you. Anybody else put down that? No?
Oh, it's
Alison. Okay. All right. The next item is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. If I can call on Deb, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I've sent out an email to members today setting out some of the information on interests that might be relevant in tonight's agenda. I'll quickly skip through it. I hope you've all read it. In relation to agenda item 8 and 9, there's no need to declare an interest if you're a member of these committees. Similarly, in relation to agenda item 10, again, no need to declare an interest because you're a member of the Standards Committee. I've set out some information there around if you know the candidate in a personal or professional capacity, whether that gives rise to an interest and what kind of interest you need to declare. So hopefully that will assist those who know the candidate. And then in relation to agenda items, excuse me, 16 and 17, the notices of motion. The proposed resolutions, on the face of it, you might think that they affect your well-being or financial position or that of a person with whom you live or a personal, close personal associate. And I've given the example there, if you or a family member or close personal associate is a pensioner or has more than 2 children, you might be affected by those notices of motion. However, the code specifies that you do not have a personal interest where the decision does not affect you to a greater degree than the majority of other council taxpayers, ratepayers or inhabitants of the ward who may be affected by that decision. So as I've set out there, there's no need to declare an interest in relation to those notices of motion. So unless there's anything else, any other interests that need to be declared.
That's all right.
Thank you. I've got a personal prejudicial interest in item 13, and that's councillors' questions relating to question 5 and 9. My employer is a recipient of the grants involved.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Any more? Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah, item number 13, question 12 on councillor's question.
And can I remind you all, please, to fill out the declaration form? Thank you.
Okay, we move on to the next item then, and that's the minutes, and that's to approve the minutes of the meeting, last meeting, and that's pages 1 through to 7. So I'll go through them one at a time. So that's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Okay, all in agreement? Thank you. Okay, the next item is written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council, and that's for information only. And then we move on then to, oh, sorry, Griffin.
On the item 4, which is the written responses to question at last ordinary, one of my colleagues asked the question. The written answer wasn't exactly what was put in the minutes, and I would ask the head of Democratic Services if we can have a look at reshaping that and coming back with a proper answer to it in the future.
Just on that, this is a little awkward now because you've just approved the minutes of the correct record with a question as drafted in it. No, I appreciate that, right? Now, one question for one, I've been back and forth several emails for best part of a month with the said councillor trying to resolve this issue. I've had no response for several weeks. I've got an actual transcript of what was actually asked, which mirrors what I've recorded in the minutes. I have reached out to be helpful, and I've asked the cabinet member to do a response based on what the councillor believes he asked, which it's up to the cabinet member to deal with that as he wants. But the minute as recorded is as drafted, and I've shared the transcript with you on an email, the last email of which was the 29th of August.
Okay, we'll beg to
But it's-
differ, but we will have a look at it when we have the answer from the cabinet member.
Yeah, can I clarify? I don't know how you actually looked at the recording, but I actually read out what I'd written down, and it wasn't the question that was actually asked. You know, that was actually put in the minutes. I know it's not a lot of difference, but it's not the question. I can't say any more than that. I actually wrote down before I asked the question, and I've regurgitated what I actually wrote down. So, and that has been resubmitted to the cabinet member as I.
So following our dialogue, I know you haven't responded to the last email, but I've asked the cabinet member to consider the emphasis that you've changed on the question. In my opinion, you've changed on the question.
Well, I haven't changed.
I'll say on that. So it's a matter for the cabinet member to consider that email, which I copied it both in on the 29th of August.
You want to speak?
Chair, to be helpful on this one, Mr. Evans is absolutely correct in what he's saying, because he has reviewed the transcript of the meeting, and I think the video evidence speaks for itself. I don't think we should be debating that this evening. The fact that the council has also refused to, or hasn't responded to multiple emails and contacts during that time is a matter of regret, because I know Mr. Evans has made efforts to try and resolve this. But if the councillor wishes to re-ask a question at any time, he can submit it for the future council, and the cabinet member, I'm sure, will be more than happy to answer it.
I'll be very happy with that, actually.
Okay, we move on to my announcements then, and unfortunately it's starting with sadness. It's with sadness that I refer to the death of former councillor Peter Davis. Peter represented Gowton on the former Lliw Valley Borough Council, and also the death of Alexander Zurawoski. It was with sadness that I refer to the tragic death of a 6-year-old. This is a very distressing and tragic incident. So can I ask you to stand for it? Please. My next announcement is on a lighter note. I'm delighted to announce that the 6 of Swansea's main parks have been awarded green flag status, recognising the vital role that they play in boosting residents' well-being and improving natural environment. Klein Gardens, Singleton Botanical Gardens, Bryn Mill Park, Park Llewellyn, Cwmdonkin Park and Victoria Park have all gained the prestigious flag status for another year. 13 community awards have also been awarded to smaller community-based gardens and green spaces in Swansea, including Friends of Coed Gwilym Park, Pont Lliw Park, Swansea Canal, Swansea Community Farm, St Samlet's Graveyard Community Garden, Coed Bark Park and Mayhill Washing Lake, and the Community Food Garden. This is the 6th year in a row that the Friends of Mayhill, Washing Lake and Community Food Garden have received the Green Flag Community Award. I'd also like to pay tribute to and to thank all the volunteers involved with the other parks, green smaller community-based gardens and green spaces in Swansea. The work by these volunteers is invaluable to Swansea and to its citizens. The next is I'd like to congratulate Annis Tower Cricket Club's first team. They won the 2nd division of the South Wales Premier Cricket League, taking them back to the 1st division next year. This is the top tier in South Wales cricket. The next one is the European Cadre Men's Cycling Adventure for Blood Cancer UK. I'd like to wish Mr Hugh Evans, Head of Democratic Services, all the best for his forthcoming European cycling adventure. Hugh and his colleagues will be cycling from Gothenburg to Amsterdam, 700 miles over 8 days. They'll cycle through Sweden, Denmark, Germany and the Netherlands, and they will be unsupported and required to carry all of their gear for the duration of their longest cycling day, which will be a grueling 137 miles. The purpose of the trip is to raise money for Blood Cancer UK, a charity dedicated to fund research and provide support to improve blood cancer patients' lives. And there is an email address there for you. Please feel free to donate directly to Hugh or via the Cardiff Men's Just Giving page. Okay. All the best, Hugh, and all the best. I wouldn't like to be cycling 137 miles, I'm sure. Review of the Senedd constituency boundaries. The Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru published its initial proposals for the review of Senedd constituency boundaries on the 3rd of September 2024. The Senedd Cymru Members and Elections Act 2024 means that the Commission will have to return 16 Senedd constituencies, which will be formed by combining two contiguous UK parliamentary constituencies. Each constituency will be represented by 6 members of the Senedd. The Commissioner's initial proposals may be viewed at DBCC Government Wales Reviews 9/24 to 26 review initial proposals. And the consultation period ends on the 30th September 2024, and responses should be made to the Senedd 2026 Review Wales / Okay, that's the end of my announcements. Thank you. Now move on to the next item, which is the announcements of the leader. Over to you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you very much, Presiding Member. My first one is just to offer thanks to all those members of the council, staff, volunteers who've been working throughout the summer period to support families. I know there's a question on the agenda tonight that the Cabinet Member has answered in terms of some of the work, it outlines some of the work that's been done there, but we should be truly proud of the work that's been done to support families over the summer. We've been able to provide free bus travel, free activities, free food, and that, coupled with a lot of the work that's been gone with the voluntary organisations, means that we've been able to support families through the summer. I also want to pay tribute to all of the events team as well, who've been putting on loads of fantastic events this summer, whether it be the shows, the air show, or other events that have, again, made Swansea proud in terms of what we've been able to offer. I would also point out that yesterday we celebrated the first 6 months of the operation of Cwtch Mawr. And members will know that that is the third Cwtch, or the third multi-bank that's been set up in the UK. We had ex-First Minister Mark Drakeford with us yesterday, and again thousands of children have received both meals, food support. Families have received thousands of packages of equipment and items that they need in their homes. So again, very proud of the work that's been done this summer. I know I'm discussing currently with Councillor Alison Anthony about what we can do towards the Christmas period to continue that support for our families. My second one is just to congratulate again the teams on the work that they've been doing. I was lucky enough today to visit the Albert Hall, our fantastic Albert Hall, which is now fully open again. And it was absolutely jam-packed. It's great to see a building that has been derelict for some 20-odd years now back in operation. It will be home to a new Dylan Thomas hotel, as well as office space and community space, and also a range of fantastic restaurants. And shortly on the heels, we will see the opening of the Palace Theatre. People will have been, no doubt, tracking the progress of that historic building and its regeneration over the summer months. And again, looking forward to seeing that fully open in the coming weeks. And then finally, as we get to October, we'll see 71-72 the Kingsway open. And that will be home to new office accommodation. And again, we're very close to announcing the first tenants for that building. Taken together, these three developments will see over 1,000 new jobs based in the city centre, again helping our city centre to recover from the COVID pandemic and to continue its economic advance. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. The next item is public questions. I don't believe we've got any this evening. Okay. The next item is the Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report for 23-24, and I'd like to call on Paula O'Connor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me to present this report. We've slightly amended the content of the report to make it more succinct, so it's not so onerous for you all to read. Just to reflect in paragraph 1.2, to highlight that there's been a change to the committee numbers, which was agreed by full council on the 7th of September. So we now have 12 committee members, 3 of which are lay and 9 are elected members. I have to thank all members, elected and lay, for their ongoing enthusiasm and participation in the Governance and Audit Committee. It really is amazing with the questions they're asking now and the constructive challenges they are giving to officers with systems and issues being raised. I've also continued to focus on the coordination between the Scrutiny Committee, and Councillor Peter Black and I regularly liaise, and I attend the workshops and whatever that I'm asked to attend with regards to that scrutiny. And I did attend the Scrutiny Planning Committee during 2024 as well. Similarly, within the terms of reference, we're asked to look at the Council's performance annual report. We continue to do that, and we're very grateful for Councillor Chris Hawley for attending the committee to help and to take us through that report. With the help of officers of the Council, we've now got a robust performance training framework for members of the Governance and Audit Committee. And recently we've had a training session on counter fraud, and we've got one on performance due to be programmed in for October. So I think it's important that we have that ongoing training to make sure our knowledge is as maximised as it can be. And I've just come from South Wales Police, where I've had all-day session with SIPFA going through effective audit committees, whether it be local authority, police, or any other public sector, which is very insightful, and I will be sharing with members of the Governance and Audit Committee in due course. If I take you to page 7 and 8 of the report in the PAC 2021, you can see the items that have come through the Audit Committee, the Governance and Audit Committee during the course of the year. And I'm very grateful for officers of the Council for bringing very comprehensive and very detailed reports to the committee to enable us to discharge our duties. Looking forward, we had a Governance and Audit Committee yesterday afternoon, which was quite a hefty agenda. We received the draft audit accounts, which were in a little bit on further on time than they were last year, and along with the annual governance statement. And it was pleasing to see the success that the finance team had delivered in producing those reports in a more timely fashion, and also the detail within the annual governance statement, which Councillor Leslie Walton has been participating in with the governance committee that's been populating that during the course of the year. There have been a couple of amendments that I've suggested since that report was brought to the committee yesterday, but it articulates quite clearly the governance challenges that moves forward as the year 24-25 goes ahead. I didn't intend to go through in any further detail because clearly you're aware of the challenges and I don't need to repeat those to you, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for the work of yourself and the committee, because obviously there's quite an extensive list of subjects that you've looked into. I wondered if the committee going forward would consider an item on budget process and how the budget consultation works. The process of the budget is presentation to council, its agreement, and any subsequent environments that might be made in the budget for the year ahead.
We are kept up to speed with the budget situation by Ben, but I'm minded there's a scrutiny committee which deals with finance performance improvement. and I'm keen not to overlap the detail of that work, because the scrutiny go into a far greater detail than we would be able to do so in the Governance and Audit Committee. So I can understand what you're saying, but I just need to make sure that we're not overlapping the work of that scrutiny committee in that level of detail. So I'm not saying no, we are cited of the budgetary development and issues, but I think there's a more detailed piece of work done at scrutiny. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that.
No, Chair, it's not to comment on that item. I think the Chair's response is absolutely correct. Just to say again, thank you for the work that the Chair and the committee has done this year. Again, as you can see from the document, there's a huge amount of work being done there. I know they've discussed a number of meaty items as well. I've been present for some of them, and the debate has been really, really good. So again, just thank you for the work that you've been doing, and look forward to working with you in the coming year.
Thank you.
Chris, did you indicate?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Can I thank the Chair of Audit, because regularly keeps me informed about what the financial risks and the policy performance. I take what the Councillor Rice is saying about the budget process, but that's something that we are discussing currently about the method by which the budget is presented, but also the add-ons to the budget through the year, which some of them will have to be scrutinised because of the size of those add-ons. Others are within the delegated budgets anyway, so it is quite a difficult one. But I take your point, and I remembered speaking to the chair of audit about how the process is developing, and I think that discussion will take place further again in the next financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Holly. Okay, that was for information, that report. So can I thank you, Paula, very much for your...
Thank you.
Mike went off then, sorry. Thank you for all the work that you've done and your team.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. We move on to the next item then, and that's the Democratic Service Committee's annual report from 23-24. And can I call on Councillor Linda James, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have nothing further to add. This is quite a short report. Just to give my thanks to the Democratic Service staff for their help and support over the year. And if anyone has any questions, then we will endeavour to answer them.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any, Councillor Stewart?
Yeah, no questions. But again, just to thank the Chair of Democratic Services and the committee for the work that they've done this year.
Okay. Chris, you want to speak, Chris? Did you want to say something? No. Okay, we move on to the next item then. That's the recruitment of the community town councillors to the Standards Committee. And can I call on Mr Evans, please, the Head of Democratic Services?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Councillors may be aware that the Standards Committee must include a community town councillor representative in order to carry out its functions when it relates to community and town council matters. The last representative resigned back in May, so following a recruitment exercise, the committee undertook an interview process and are recommending to council that community councillor Mark Parkinson of Pennard Community Council be appointed as the representative on the Standards Committee, and the report asks you to support that recommendation.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes, as a member of the Standards Committee, I'd like to propose that Community Councillor Mark Parkinson of Pennard Community Council be appointed to the Standards Committee. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stewart, thank you. All in favour of the report? Okay, any abstentions? Any against? Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. We then move on to the next item, which is the sorry, I've lost my face. It's the amendments to the Council's Constitution, Article 4 and Budget Policy Framework. Mr Evans, please. Oh, sorry, it's you, Deb, sorry.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, this report seeks to make 2 amendments to 2 parts of the Constitution, Article 4 and the Budget Policy and Framework. The report, page 45, sets out what Article 4 is about. It sets out the roles and functions of the full meeting of Council, those functions that must be undertaken by Council as prescribed by legislation, different types of Council meetings and the Council's responsibility to approve the budget and to adopt the policy framework. The policy framework is described in paragraph 2 of the report, and it's basically those policies and procedures which need to be adopted by Council. There is a list of them. They're quite out of date, so we've taken the opportunity to review them and update them and to put them in some form of order so that they make a little bit more sense in a strategic framework sort of way. So there are those policies and procedures which have to go to Council for approval by law, and there are those policies and procedures which you can choose to go to Council for approval. So on page 48, I've set out there the policy framework, the new framework that's proposed, and you'll see under those headings the policies, procedures that will need to go to Council for approval or for amendment. And in brackets, it sets out where you can find those procedures. So some are already in the Council Constitution elsewhere. Some have to go to Council by law, and the relevant bit of legislation is put in brackets there. And some we're deciding by way of local discretion or local choice for them to go to Council for approval, and that's specified in brackets again. There are a couple of amendments that I need to make to this report. So on page 48, there's a heading, Service Strategies, Policies and Plans. And on page 49, the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Strategy. I need to delete the bit in brackets there which says VAWDASV Wales Act 2015 and insert instead local discretion. And below that, Air Quality Action Plan, delete Environment Act 1995 Part 4 and put local discretion. And at the end of that section, there needs to be an additional plan added, which was omitted, and that's the Youth Justice Plan. And in brackets, the relevant piece of legislation is the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. So subject to those 3 amendments, Presiding Member, those amendments need to be made to the text. And then on the last section of the report is the changes to the budget policy and framework. So if I can refer you to page 51. There's a section there which sets out the budget heads. Now, previously, these were linked to cabinet portfolios and those change over time. So it's proposed that instead we have the budget heads as education, social services, place, financial services and corporate services. So this report has gone through CWG and has been approved, cross-party approval. However, those amendments are being brought to you today. Those amendments haven't gone to CWG, but I think that they shouldn't in any way be contentious. And 2 of them just set out that they are local discretion policies rather than legislation policies. And the Youth Justice Plan has been added to the list, which again, as I say, shouldn't be too contentious. So that's the document there, Presiding Member, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I send you to move the vote first, please. Rita.
Chair, happy to move.
Okay, seconder. Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Can I refer you to your page 49? Just for clarity, 2 amendments you made where you're deleting legislative requirement. Does that now mean that the council is not bound by any legal requirement in regards to violence against women or air quality?
The reference to the Act there, the 2015 Act, was... Sorry, you can't hear me. My mic's on. So, can you hear me now, Councillor? Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. The reference to the legislation was inserted because it was thought initially that that legislation prescribed that it had to go to council for approval. But in fact, the legislation says that it needs to be published, but it doesn't necessarily need to be approved by council. But we are choosing to make it a policy that should be adopted by council. But it's a matter of choice, not a matter of legislation.
And then on to page 51, you referred to the environment in the budget. You've reduced the budget heads from 10 to 5, but kept the ceiling for environment at the same aggregate of 5% of the total aggregate revenue budget of the council. Is that perceived to have any difficulty, as environment between those budget heads are likely to be larger than the 10 smaller ones?
There was no intention to change the percentages there's no intention to change the percentages at all. The purpose of this amendment is simply to clarify the headings, because it makes more sense to have them aligned with directorate budgets rather than portfolio budgets. But the limits stay the same.
Yeah, I understand that bit. It's the fact that the same overall budget for the council is now divided between 5 budget heads as opposed to 10. So if you want to vie between those budgets, it is likely that they might want to vie more than they would have done if they were in one of the 10th subdivisions. So what I'm asking is whether holding the ceiling for environment at 5% of the aggregate total revenue budget is likely to provide any difficulty in the need of any environments between those smaller budget headings.
Perhaps if I could come in, presiding member, and give assistance.
Yeah, I'm just going to call you in, Mr. Smith. Okay.
Thank you, presiding member. In one sense, Councillor Phillips makes a perfectly valid point that it's half the number, but equally it is reflective of effectively how the budget has been set for a number of years. The budget as approved in council has been set on that directorate basis for a number of years, and it has got very long in the tooth with the sort of reference to the cabinet members' portfolios. It's been set on a directorate basis for the reason the monitoring officer has said, that effectively it's much more stable and has been for a number of years. I am absolutely satisfied as your section 151 officer that it will not impede proper function. The reason I form that view is that actually there is very substantial delegation to myself and to relevant cabinet members to make environments, and it is extremely rare for me to need to have ever relied on that environment arrangement. There is one coming, I anticipate, at cabinet, but that is not as a result of this proposed amendment. It is just one of those rare occasions where the total environment to be considered is way above even my delegated authority to act on your behalf. But I am satisfied that it does not impede, because the reality is it's how we've operated setting the budgets for a number of years, and it is rightly tidying up something that's probably been left a bit too long in the tooth. We haven't taken stock and looked at what is set out, but effectively what you've given effect to in the budget as approved by council for a number of years is what this is now saying you're going to be doing. So I hope that gives you assurance, Councillor Phillips, and I hope I don't eat my words in due course and come up with too many mega environments that require approval of council or cabinet.
I take it, Chair, that was no.
You know, I'd always like to take a long answer. Yes, the short answer for you, Mr. Phillips, Councillor Phillips, as ever with brevity, is no, it will have no impact.
Councillor Rice.
My question's on a very similar theme. In terms of the maximum environment being 5%, how are these totals monitored throughout the year? I think that's probably more a question for the 151 officer.
Mr. Smith, would you like to answer that, please?
Yes, so again, in reality, no underlying environment in the ledger, because although you set a set of papers for the budget, it is all loaded into the Oracle Fusion system and its predecessor system. And the reality is no officer will make a change without my personal approval. It is controlled by a number of officers, and I ultimately make the decision in terms of whether any threshold has been triggered. We do adopt a local convention that we do excuse technical adjustments, whether, for example, a very late announced grants which may affect the net position overall. That would otherwise result in me coming back many times potentially for no need. So it is monitored through a system, and if I believe a trigger is reached, I will bring it to Cabinet and Council. The level is of significant value, 5% of a £600 million budget. I do accept on individual budgets, it's a smaller threshold. I have not needed to trigger that more than once. I've got one coming up, but that is distinctly not related to this proposed change. It would have happened anyway under the old rules if you were so minded to change them.
Okay, thank you, Mr Smith. It's been moved, oh, sorry, Councillor Buck.
Can I just follow up this question about environment, because it seems to be the significance in terms of the way the environment works. I'm perfectly happy to accept Mr Smith's reassurances that everything's above board and everything works out. But what they're saying here is that if it's a maximum up to 5% can be carried out by various cabinet members or officers without reference to council. If it goes above 5%, it has to come to a council meeting. Now, if your budget is £1 million, 5% is what, £50,000. So fine, nothing above £50,000 can come to council. But if as a result of merging these budget headings, your budget goes up to £2 million, then you're now viring £100,000 without coming to council. So the impact is that higher sums are being vired without reference to council, purely because we're relying on a percentage cut of a reduced numbers of budget heads. So I think this isn't a matter of things not being done properly. This is a matter of things being done without reference to council by virtue of the fact that you haven't amended the percentage in line with the reduction in the number of budget heads.
Mr Smith, do you want to come back in?
Yeah. Net revenue budget, yeah.
I accept that in one sense, but I would remind that the budget as set by council is set on a directorate basis anyway, so I do not believe it has any material impact. If the budget had been set routinely on the basis of 10 portfolios and changed to 5 directorates, I think the points that Councillor Phillips and Councillor Rice have made would be absolutely valid and should trigger a review of the threshold, but I don't think it needs to, because in reality, council has set the budget on this basis as is set out anyway, so I don't think it does trigger it. I would accept if it had been set on a different basis, that would have been right to consider changing the threshold. But that's the reason why I don't believe you need to change the threshold.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so I'm going to go to the vote. So the recommendation is that the amendments to Article 4 are set out in paragraph 3.1 of this report, and the amendments to the budget policy and framework set out in paragraph 4, and that these amendments are made to the council's constitution. So can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. That's okay. There's just one chair here, okay? Okay, move on to the next item then, and that's membership of committees. And I'd like to call on Councillor David Hopkins, please.
Yeah, thanks, Presiding Member. Just want to move names as submitted.
Proposer, can I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Okay. Any questions? No? So we're going to move to the vote then. So all in favour of the report? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Okay, thank you. We now move on to councillors' questions, and it's 30 minutes. Okay, so it's now 6. So the first question is from Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Can I thank the leader for his answer? In the preamble to the full question, I would like to ask a number of questions. I want to remind council that there's no legal privilege in this council. If we say things in here or write things in here, then that is what it's supposed to, that is taken as a legal document effectively. And that also indicates also the position that the unique position the leader's in. If the leader has actually written something or has said something, then basically it's the council saying it because of the very nature of his particular role and the very nature of the fact that under legislation, the cabinet is the leader's cabinet. It may well be elected as the politicians might, but the reality is it is the leader's cabinet. And to say that, if the answer to the question actually poses a number of other questions. And that is because in the answer, the leader is indicating that a political party preferred an option of a loan. Now, I know, and I'm sure the leader knows, and maybe other councillors know, that if we borrow money as a council, we have to have a document called the FPR7. That FPR7 is signed off by both legal and finance. And to indicate in a written answer that it was a favour from that we had a particular type of loan is actually quite wrong. And not only is it wrong, but it indicates a method, for the want of a better term, it indicates pressure being put on to officers to go a certain way. But it also brings in another very serious case, and that is the fact that officers who have a legal duty and a professional duty to get best value for the council haven't actually got best value. They've listened to a party and gone out and got those loans. Now, I think the leader needs to say whether or not he has the confidence that those officers who signed off those documents, the FPR7s, were doing it in the best interest of the council and the people of Swansea, or it was done under political pressure, because the wording of this about favour, that actually indicates that that's what that particular party or that administration at the time wanted. So I would like an answer to that. I have another question, but I would like an answer to that.
Yeah, very, very long.
On a point of order, Chairman, a point of clarification, just so we're clear as to what's being asked. Is the leader of the opposition suggesting that is the leader of the opposition suggesting that the leader of council is lying?
I am indicating that the answer to the question is saying that a political party favoured a loan method, and that loan method, how could we have done that when it's signed off by officers of this authority? Now, I'm asking him, why is he written it that way?
I'm happy to.
Point, Chairman. The leader of the opposition is suggesting in his opening remarks about the limited protection that we have as councillors, different to that, for example, joined by members of parliament. And he's suggesting that he clearly was suggesting that what the leader says, the leader of the council, is the words of a politician as opposed to an officer who has some other degrees of legal protection. But the suggestion quite clearly, Councillor Holly, was that the leader was not being honest in the answer that he gave. Is that what you're actually suggesting to us now?
I've already asked the question of the leader and I'm waiting for a reply. And
Yeah,
then we'll go from there.
I'm grateful for Councillor Phillips' intervention, but I will answer the question myself. Thank you very much. On this one, I think the preamble was somewhat misleading because we had this debate at the last meeting, so I was surprised to see the question raised again. It is a matter of historical fact that the previous administration did, from time to time, take out lender option, borrower option loans. Those have proved to have terms around them that are more risky and more volatile than the sort of borrowing that this administration has taken out. The wording there, which obviously I would not put wording into a response unless it had been through the various checks and balances, says that seemingly often favoured by the previous Lib Dem administration. And that is evidenced by the fact that there are a number of these type of loans that are still in existence, that are coming to the point whereby the lender may decide to say, actually, we are changing the terms of this loan and we're now going to charge you this amount of interest because we have the right to do so under the agreement that you signed. I perfectly accept the fact that often the transaction is done by the Chief Finance Officer at the time, Mr. Smith, would have done the transaction on our behalf for these. But the reality is, I have conversations with Mr. Smith on a weekly basis about how we borrow, what our strategy is, how we do it. The point I made previously is it appears that either there was a discussion between the administration and the then Chief Finance Officer to take out these loans, or there wasn't. And if there wasn't, I'd equally ask the question, why weren't you interested in the borrowing that was being taken out during your time in office? I mean, that is a statement of fact. In fact, I will share publicly as well, Mr. Smith is monitoring the Lobos closely at the moment because, as I say, they are approaching a period in time whereby we may be asked by the lender to pay a significant fee. And if that is the case, we may exercise our right to pay off that loan in its entirety to avoid the extra costs to the taxpayer.
Thank you for that, understanding. But I have to say that during the period of the 8 years when we had an enlightened council, there was a number of payoffs of the previous LIBOR loans from the Labour administration prior to us taking over. So it's not an unusual thing. And it's been signed off by many officers. Now, the conversations you say took place, yes, they took place probably. I wasn't at the level of those conversations, but realised about it. But the reason this question has come back is the fact, and I object to the fact that the implication made about officers, being put under, oh yeah, we'll have those LIBOR loans because that's all that's available. And I do object, and I think you...
Chair, could I just intervene there? Because I think it'll help Councillor Holly on this one. I do not read that sentence in the way that he is reading it. There's no suggestion of pressure here. What this is saying is, of all the options available to your administration at the time and the finance officers at the time, you favoured this option in terms of looking at all of the options available for you, and you went for that one. It's a perfectly legitimate choice. It's proved to be a more expensive and a more risky one. That's the point I'm making. So it's not about pressure. So please do not describe it that way. That isn't written anywhere in here. It is about exercising choice, and that's what you did at the time.
So the leader is perfectly able to tell us what other choices were available at that time, because
yes, you could go to the market on a number of different borrowing mechanisms.
A higher interest rate, then you'd have had the same argument then. So really what I'm trying to say to you is, you were saying about all these particular loans, we've had them for 20 or 30 or 40 years before I came along, and we were paying them off as we went along. It's just that I feel that the word in there actually came down to say, oh yeah, you had that because that was the only one. It wasn't. We did it, and the officers recommended it. And what you were saying is, oh no, it was because we favoured it. That is incorrect. You know very well that we can't do that. We've got to take officers' advice. You took officers' advice to borrow money at an interest rate which is very, very, very low. And as I said to you before, you're very lucky to have done that. Others are not. And if you borrow it again now, the rate has gone up. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holly. As I said before, I don't feel lucky. I mean, obviously, you must feel yourself very unlucky in terms of the 8 years that you had there. And I do feel that you did get a bit of bad luck during that 8 years.
Yeah, that bad luck was actually having to borrow stuff to pay for the mess that you left.
I'm going to move progress now.
Hold on a minute. Don't laugh.
Presiding member.
The mess I had a leisure centre had to reopen, and worst of all, we spent a fortune doing this building up, and you got water pouring in now. You can't look after anything, man. Anyway, I'm going off. That's it.
Councillor Black, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to refer back to what the leader said previously, where he effectively indicates that because he has a very hands-on approach with the finance officer going through the various methods of borrowing money, etc., that he implied that to do otherwise might well be negligence on the part of another leader who might not have done that. But the legislation and the Local Government Act, I think, or the Local Government Finance Act and Local Government Act clearly says that the responsibility of the Section 151 officer is solely responsible for those arrangements. So the fact that you have a hands-on arrangement doesn't make you any more virtuous than someone, because it's still, at the end of the day, the Chief Finance Officer's responsibility in terms of how that money is borrowed and what loans is taken out in what format. So I don't see how you can claim that because you do things differently, anyone doing something else is negligent in the way that you have.
Again, I think Councillor Black's drifting off the point a little bit, because if you listen carefully to what I said that I have regular meetings with Mr. Smith. We discuss the strategy, we discuss what borrowing is being taken, because I am interested as the Cabinet Member for Finance in what borrowing we are taking and what risks we are taking when we take that borrowing. I'm sure had the borrowing turned out not to be as successful as it has been, you would be holding the politicians to account and not going after Mr. Smith in this chamber. So this is the difference between, even though I accept the technical point that, and I did reference this, Mr. Smith does the transaction. He actually takes the decision about when to buy and what to buy or when to borrow. But the reality is we have continued from day one to be an administration where the members are in control and where the members take responsibilities for their portfolios and the members understand what the responsibilities in those portfolios are. I've said previously many times, I often felt that during the time where the coalition were in power, they weren't fully on top of their briefs, some of the members, and I've said that clearly.
On a point of order, Chair, the leader has just said that we're going after Mr. Smith in this chamber, which is completely untrue and not the case. And I actually take that back, because that is not what we are doing. What we're trying to do is to highlight the fact that the responsibility for these loans is down to the Section 151 officer and the methods in which they're done. It's not about going after an officer. It's about making sure that the leader's misleading statements are actually corrected.
Okay, I'm going to bring Mr. Smith in. Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, presiding member. Two things I would wish to say. The first, in a personal capacity, I can assure the chamber and everyone who has spoken, I do not feel that anyone is impugning or going after me whatsoever. So I have taken it in the vein in which I think it should be taken by all. So I wanted to put that on the record in terms of my officer view. I would also confirm that the reality is, as has been set out by both sides in terms of the conversations, for the avoidance of doubt, for the time I have been your Section 151 officer, undoubtedly every individual decision has been solely mine, taken on the basis of prevailing rates and financial advice. The leader is absolutely right. I continue to have frequent conversations and discussions with him and keep him appraised of decisions I am making, but I have exercised 100% of those choices myself at all times. I cannot speak for what happened when I wasn't the Section 151 officer, but I am sure all previous Section 151 officers equally followed exactly those same processes and arrangements. And I do feel it is appropriate to also recognise, as Councillor Holly has made clear, rates are the rates at the time at which decisions are taken and made. And sometimes some people win, sometimes people lose. And my predecessor officers probably had no better rates available at the time in terms of prevailing rates. The leader's comment is absolutely correct that at the moment, any lender that chooses to exercise their option to change the rates, there's only going to be one response from me, playing high stakes poker, which is I'll call you when I'm out and I repay in full. That is again an officer decision I am taking at the moment, but I am not equally seeing it as anything impugning predecessor officers, and for the avoidance of doubt, I operate 100% operational independence on all of those because the law requires me to, as is set out in the delegations under the Treasury Management Policy, Treasury Management Statement, but the leader is making clear that of course I keep him regularly appraised of all operational decisions I take, because all Treasury Management operations are fully vested in me. You get an opportunity once a year to agree the policy and at the same time once a year to ask questions of me, but I can assure members I have taken no slight whatsoever from anything that's been said on all sides. So no one needs to be concerned at all in that way, shape or form. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you for your explanation and your clarification.
Thank you, Chair. I think in looking at the question, and this is for the Cabinet Member, there's an importance in what words you use. And I think if you look at the second paragraph, it's the word instead, which is really important, because it suggests that you haven't closely followed the advice of CFOs. And I certainly, when I was Cabinet Member, always followed the advice of CFOs. And as current Section 151 officer has outlined, that we have to legally do so. So would you, as a Cabinet Member and a Cabinet Member of Finance, look at maybe amending your response by removing the word instead? And I've got a second follow-up question for you, which is on a different theme, which you'll probably be glad to hear. And that's on the amount of borrowing and the purpose of it. So would the Cabinet member be able to outline to us that I know we've taken this advantageous rate of borrowing recently, and we've borrowed a lot of money. Now, when you take out a loan, you have to name what that thing's for. And obviously there'd be a series of projects under that. Given time passing and the fact that the money has been held onto and not spent, do you have enough money to pay for all the things that you've said that you're going to do it with?
Yeah, so the first one is a very simple answer, which is no, I will not amend the response because it is correct. Because if Councillor Rice reads the response, you have to read the second paragraph in line with the first paragraph, which is, I'm making the point there that LOBO loans were taken out. We have taken no LOBO loans out. Mr. Smith said that as Chief Finance Officer, he would not be interested in taking those sorts of loans out. Instead, what we have done is taken out long-term fixed borrowing for 50 years. We've said that at every scrutiny session where we've been asked. So it's technically and grammatically correct that that is what we've done. We did not do LOBOs. We've done long-term borrowing. It's a fact. The second point on the reasons for borrowing, yes, absolutely right. You cannot borrow in advance of need. We have a significantly large capital programme with ambitions to build additional assets in the city centre, to build a number of new schools. Mr. Smith would have estimated what that need was and therefore made the appropriate borrowings at the time, which is what we did, and obviously locked them in at low rates. Obviously, in terms of the capital programme, due to COVID, due to the fact that some schemes take a number of years to come online, we have not yet deployed all of that capital. We are continuing to monitor all of the schemes to ensure that we value engineer them, as you do on every scheme. Obviously, there are inflationary pressures, and from time to time, the Cabinet may revise the capital programme. Indeed, at scrutiny, I did say to Councillor Holly, who was chairing it, or Councillor Black, I can't remember who was in the chair at the time, but certainly the response was, we are doing more profiling of the capital programme at the moment to understand the spend more easily. And again, if we get to a point whereby we do not feel that we have all of the resources available to do all the projects in the way that we would like to do them, the first step would be to look at the projects and to see whether you would amend either of those or you could deliver them differently, save money. The second would be to look at the overall scope of the capital programme. But at the present time, our belief is we can deliver all of the things that we've promised.
Just to follow up on that one, Leader, a follow-up question. Would I be right to say that the focus of the current administration in terms of profiling their borrowing and their sort of priorities with it is, it seems to be city centre and other projects over education, as everything education seems to move backwards?
For somebody who used to hold the Cabinet Member for Finance brief, the numbers seem to be a bit confusing. The largest capital programme we have in this council is the education programme. That remains the biggest slug of what we deliver as a capital programme. And again, as we move into the next phase of education, there will be a hefty requirement on this council to meet its commitment, whether it be in the 35-65 split or whatever. So the education spend remains the major part of this. But of course, one of the things that we've had to do as an administration, our manifesto commitment was to build a better Swansea. That means in terms of building better housing, building better schools, building better community buildings, ensuring we've got better social services, and also delivering a city centre that functions as an economic and regional centre. You cannot do that when you have market failure, which is what we inherited. We had a city centre where investment from the private sector was almost non-existent. We have turned that around. You are now seeing large-scale private investment. We secured the city deal, £1.3 billion for the region, a large chunk of that coming to Swansea to deliver the arena, 71-72 Kingsway. We delivered the Palace Theatre, the Albert Hall. There is 71-72 Kingsway. We're working on the redevelopment of the British Home Stores. Castle Gardens is about to start. We're about to build a new public sector hub next year, subject to planning and all of the other elements with it. The phase 2 of Copper Bay is going on. We've got Skyline waiting to put its application in for the Kilvey Hill. And again, we're doing a full rework of the river corridor building on the work that's been done in Penderyn, to make sure that we restore our heritage along there. Those are the things that we have as part of the capital programme. Those are the investments that we're making as on top of the smaller investments that we've made in terms of 7 million for 50 odd play areas across the county being restored, which had fallen into disrepute over many years. Massive amounts of new active travel routes have been delivered. We've upgraded our highways. We've upgraded all of the lighting columns. I could go on and go on. I mean, if Councillor Rice feels that none of those things are worth funding, then he needs to come out and say so. But that is why you borrow. You borrow to invest, to deliver on the things that the people of Swansea asked for. And the reason why you're in opposition, Councillor Rice, and we're in power is because the administration you were part of failed to deliver the things that the people of Swansea wanted.
Okay.
I gotta say, that's a hell of a statement to make, if you don't mind me saying so. When we borrowed money, it was to cover your mistakes and your errors. But anyway, I will now, all seriousness aside, we heard what Mr. Smith had to say, and a totally unbiased opinion, and his definition and his comments about this answer really indicate what I said, and that is the fact that officers actually make those decisions about how we borrow and what. You can have all the conversations you like in the world, but, you know, I will ask you now if you will amend the answer for the next council to read that the decision to borrow is an officer's decision, and the how we borrow and what rates we borrow, etc., is an officer's decision, not a member's decision. I will ask you now if you will alter your answer to say that. If you will, fair enough. If you won't, then we'll have to wait and see for the future. Because I do think that, I don't know what you say in your group meetings, I don't know what you say in your executive, but, you know, one councillor actually said, I was going to ask a question about risky Lobo loans. They're not risky. You know, and I think you need to understand that, because that was said. I've watched the tape, and it has been said. Now, I think you need to understand how the feeling about what members feel and officers feel.
You said it was a
about that.
small question, Chris.
Chair, just a point of clarification here. Mr. Smith has already given a technical description of how the system works, and Mr. Smith has already clarified that those decisions are taken by him. That is fine. The point that this answer also draws out is that the administration will set its programme out. That programme needs to be funding, and as part of that, you may well need to borrow. That is what your administration did at the time. Nobody is criticising an administration for needing to borrow. Councillor Holly, I sat quietly while you're protesting far too much here. It's obviously touched a nerve. The point here is Lobo loans are technically more risky. They carry more risk than fixed rate borrowing, because when you take fixed rate borrowing, you know what you're taking out and you know what you've got to pay back. There's no variance in it. There's no risk in it in that respect. You know what you're getting. When you go for a Lobo, your lender can change the rate later on and hit you with a larger bill. And if you don't have the resources to pay off that loan, you are then faced with higher rates which you can't control. Luckily, this administration has set aside significant amounts of reserves. So if the Lobo loan is called in or is changed, Mr. Smith has the firepower to pay it off. So, look, I think you've already had the clarification. I don't think I need to go any further. I'm not disagreeing with what Mr. Smith has said. As Mr. Smith has said, you've had the clarification. I think everybody's clear on the technicalities of this now. But Lobo loans were taken out during your administration's time in office, and we have not taken any Lobo loans out under Mr. Smith's guidance since he's been the finance officer.
Okay, we've had 25 minutes on that question. Okay, so if nobody's got anything different to say, I'm just going to move on to the next question. Okay. The next is from Councillor Mike White.
If I can ask a supplement, if possible. Both Councillor Bear Watkins and I are very grateful for the response of the leader, and of course what's been achieved at the Harvard Copper Works. because that building was obviously derelict, run down since 1980. And we're truly grateful because of obviously regenerate within our ward and obviously brought in well-needed employment. But can the leader perhaps let us know, under the previous administration between 2004 and 2012, what schemes were carried out then?
Thank you, Councillor White. I don't have the full list of schemes, and obviously Councillor Holly has already alluded to the fact that this building was invested in by the Lib Dem coalition administration, and obviously this was a priority for the Lib Dems at the time to restore this building. It is a wonderful building and it's great to have it. The ones that weren't, though, are obviously Palace Theatre was either in private ownership or derelict at the time. You would have had Albert Hall, which again was closed. Obviously, you mentioned the Penderyn site, which was the old ICI site, which again had lain derelict for some time. Of course, what they did do during the time in office was take away one of our fantastic monuments in the Slip Bridge, take that down and not restore it. That was one they could have restored and paid for. We took it down. They didn't put it back. That's right, because they promised to, didn't they? That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thank you for the correction there. I do recall they asked the public about whether they should put it back and then ignored the results. So all I can say, Councillor White, is I think again, you can see a pattern here, can't you? Of not really dealing with the issues before them, and again, I'm more than happy. I mean, if the opposition want to ask the question, could we have a list of the things done under the Liberal Democrat administration and a list of the things done under the Labour administration? I'd be happy to put that list out because I think one would be much longer than the other.
Councillor May.
I agree wholly with a sentence in paragraph 2 of the answer, where the leader says there's no legal obligation for owners to maintain these buildings. Now, the very building we're sitting in actually has had what was once a very reliable timepiece called the Guildhall clock. Can I ask the leader, when is it going to be fully functional and reliable again, as it used to be enjoyed for years?
As Councillor May will be aware, we've had some issues in negotiating with CADU around the works that are needed to the clock tower in terms of the repairs that we want to do, and as a result of that, obviously there's been some water ingress into the building. My understanding is there are works also ongoing to the mechanism of the clock. I think it changed from analog to digital some years ago, and that the mechanism that's in place obviously was one that was maintained by a person who's now retired from the council, which is why we made the change as well in terms of modernisation. But yes, the hope is that it will be operational in due course.
Councillor Philpott.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I just wanted to go through a little bit of a time scale here. Might be a bit frivolous, actually. But the Liberal Democrat administration came into power or administration in 2004 and sadly left in 2012. So was the questioner and the answer all about, so were all of those buildings, were they in fine fettle in 2004 and just deteriorated to 2012, or were they always deteriorating? And then, of course, the question then is, were we expected in 8 years to put them all right when in 2004, like the proverbial Labour Party at the moment in Westminster, we got into a power to find that the black hole was a lot bigger than what we'd anticipated? But I think, let's be realistic here. Buildings don't deteriorate in 8 years, do they? Come on. Get a grip, everybody.
I'm not. I got to say.
Calm down, everybody. Calm down.
I got to say, I'm not sure whether Councillor Philpott said that you sadly left or gladly left in 2012. I'm not sure which it was. I think it was gladly for the population of Swansea. but the point being here is, I think Councillor White's question was, can you say what the previous administration did to deal with those buildings that needed rescuing? The facts remain. We've found a way of restoring those buildings, getting them either into public ownership again, or getting in grants that allow us or others to restore those buildings and bring them back into proper use, back into economic use. That is really important because those 1,000 jobs that I talked about, some of those are based now. Well-paid jobs are going to be based in places like the Palace Theatre, which has no economic impact for the city for decades. Same as the Albert Hall, it has been a dead space. And that's one of the reasons why the city has struggled, because there are far too many dead spaces. I think we've been exceptionally successful in deploying a range of strategies to bring those buildings back into use. But I think the relevant point is there. Of course, buildings every day, from the time you build them to the time you then do something with them, will deteriorate at a rate. The point being is, I think we've got a very good record on ensuring that those buildings that were derelict or failing were restored and are now back in economic use by this administration.
Councillor O'Brien.
Just an observation, actually, that while the Lib Dems were empowered during those times, it was actually a Labour UK government. So no wonder why you probably struggled at the time. But this administration have been under a UK Conservative government for many years and seem to have delivered a lot of projects. So very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, we have, and we have delivered despite the UK Labour, the UK government, Tory government.
We are way over the 30 minutes for council.
Can I just add to
As long as we
reply on the, because it's my portfolio as well, and the question was to the leader or cabinet member, and I would like to assure Councillor White and Councillor Hopkins that planning permission has also gone in for the V&A building and extra buildings down at the old, as we all used to refer to it, the IM site, the Yorkshire Imperial Metal site, and there will be more buildings restored. And I'm sure, and the UK government did acknowledge what we were doing, because the select committee came down to Swansea to see the heritage buildings that were being restored by Swansea. And we were held up as an exemplar of councillors of how we were looking after our heritage. And in fact, Swindon Council, it's a Labour council now, because in the last local government elections, the Conservative controlled council in Swindon brought in a Labour council who came down to see how Swansea were doing the heritage buildings and why the previous Conservative one there didn't. And they came down to see what we were doing here, I think on the recommendation of the select committee. But I would say we are using levelling up money, so I will give some credit there.
Okay, we're way over the 30 minutes which I've said, but I will allow you to speak then, as long as you're brief.
Great, fine, very quickly. On the point that Councillor O'Brien made, of course, you did enjoy very low interest rates thanks to that Conservative government in the way they managed the economy, and Swansea residents benefiting.
I'm sorry, Chair, I've got to respond to that one. Has Councillor Jones been on holiday since Liz Truss's time in office? Because has he looked at his mortgage statement recently? Because what you'll find is, unfortunately, due to the fact that we had the pleasure of the lettuce that was Liz Truss for a whole 40 odd days, that she wrecked the economy, drove up interest rates, and now everybody's paying more for their mortgages.
Okay. Okay, that's the end of the questions because we're way over. I've been asked to move one of the notices of motion. So is everybody in agreement for me to do that, to just bring one forward? Because council. No, it's 30 minutes. And we are actually on about 35, 36, actually. We're way over. Which one are you moving, Andrea? It's the one with the frisbee things. What do you call them? Yeah.
Thank you, Presiding Member. First of all, can I place on record my thanks to the leader. We did hope that we could have brought it to July Council, but it didn't pass the emergency test for notice of motion because it was late being submitted, and therefore the leader raised awareness of this in his announcements at council at that time. So I really do appreciate that, because that was important ahead of the summer holidays, where families might be going to beaches and potentially using these plastic rings, and I'm really grateful for that awareness raising. I'll be very brief, but there are a few things that I just want to pick out of the notice of motion. So we know that the Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk set out a ban of plastic ring sales and usage on their beaches. And that was as a result of 3 seals which became trapped with them around their necks, causing deep wounds which became infected, and this is sometimes resulting in the death of seals. So I know we're working very closely with Gower Seal Society to address this. I'm pleased to say, and I'm sorry Councillor Richard Lewis is not in the chamber this evening, but he did allude during the leader's announcements that it would be unlikely that some shops and traders would actually take up the ban of sale. But I'm actually pleased to advise, as is stated in the notice of motion, that a number of businesses have already signed up to ban the sale of such products. And that's Kennigston Camping and Caravan Park at Llangenneth, and Pitton Cross Camping and Caravan Park, and also Tesco, Pets at Home, CVS, Vets, and Coastal Asda stores. So this motion calls upon the goodwill of the people of Swansea and the visitors to Swansea to ask them to not purchase these items in the interest of making sure that seals are not harmed. I think it's a small ask, but it's something where a small action can actually make a huge difference. So it gives me great pleasure to move this notice of motion, and I hope that it's supported here this evening.
Chair, formally second, because we've discussed it previously.
Yeah, very happy to support that. And in fact, I visited a stand at the Gower show along with Councillor Andrew Stevens and Councillor O'Brien, and they were promoting it. And I know that we have promoted it as well. And I've spoken to a couple of businesses who are going to take them off sale. It's okay to have the solid ones, but really those rings are dangerous. And I think the more we promote it and get it out there, the better.
Councillor Stevens.
Member, I think everybody should support this for the benefit of it, of everyone. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens, did you wish to speak? I'll bring you in on it. Did you have your hand up, Andrew?
Yeah, I wanted to speak on the motion, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'm really pleased to support this motion today. While actually may seem like a small action, I believe it'll have a really real impact on protecting our local marine wildlife, Chair. Especially the North Atlantic grey seals, which are such an important part of our Gower coastline. These flying rings now, although they may actually seem like harmless toys, they're a real threat to seals. And as you'll see what it says in the motion, Chair, particularly younger ones, because the seals are curious animals, and they often investigate unfamiliar objects. And when the seal gets its head stuck in a discarded flying ring, it becomes trapped. And sadly, once that happens, it's almost impossible for them to free themselves. Over time, the ring cuts deeper into their flesh, causing agonizing pain, infection, and in many cases, a slow, painful death. Here on the Gower coast, we're actually lucky to have a small but significant portion of the UK's grey seal population, with around 38% of the global population in UK waters, and there's a significant portion with us. They're already dealing with a lot of pressures from human disturbance, and flying rings are an additional avoidable threat that we really need to tackle. So as my colleague rightly said, I'd like to also take this opportunity to to commend the coastal businesses in Gower that have already shown leadership by stopping the sale of flying rings, such as the Kennigston Caravan Park, Pitton Cross, as well as I believe the Surfside Cafe in Langland as well. These have all made the responsible choice to stop selling these products, and their actions actually show a strong commitment to protecting our local wildlife, and I applaud them for taking this step. they've set a great example for others to follow, and I hope that more businesses will join in. I know, as Councillor Lewis said, it was briefly mentioned in last council meeting that these rings have been popular sellers for some businesses, but I truly believe that is because the public aren't aware of the potential damages they can cause. You know, realistically, there's little difference between the play value of a solid disc frisbee or a flying ring, and those businesses that have already taken the step have been rightly praised by both the community and the media, Chair. I did also want to highlight the fantastic work of the Gower Seal Group. I've had the pleasure of meeting them not only in the Gower show, but when we were doing Give Seal Space campaign down in Mumbles. They're a dedicated group of volunteers, and they've worked hard to help clear out beaches, recover discarded rings, and engage with the community and local retailers to raise awareness of the dangers these plastic rings pose to wildlife. Their efforts have gained attention both locally and nationally, and it shows just how much the people of Swansea care about protecting our environment and the creatures that live within it.
Stevens, because I got other speakers as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries, Chair. We now have the chance to be the first council in Wales to take action by discouraging the use of flying rings on our beaches. Supporting this voluntary ban will help protect our wildlife and bring us in line with national efforts. So needless to say, I think I urge you all to support this motion. It's a simple but important step to protecting our local environment, and by backing this voluntary ban, we show that we're serious about safeguarding our natural space and wildlife. And this is a real opportunity for us as a council to lead by example by discouraging the use of these rings. We'll not be only protecting our seals, but by also showing our commitment to preserving the beauty and biodiversity of our coastline. So, yeah, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As the last council for completeness, we'd like to add our group support for it. It's a little measure that can go a long way. I think Councillor Richard Lewis was referring to frisbees in a bygone day when they were solid objects when he made his remark, and I think the leader picked up the nuance of that in our last council meeting, that I think rings weren't invented in the day that Councillor Lewis was selling them. And thankfully they weren't, otherwise we wouldn't be having this debate now. Yeah.
Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Brien.
Oh, that's very hurtful. Thank you, presiding member. No, it's great to see that 2 local family-run businesses in Gower, that's not news to us, are leading the way on stamping that out. What I do think, though, we need to keep the pressure on the bigger chains. I think, you know, we've got the internet, which is a real issue with so many things being sold on the internet. So I think that's where we need to focus our attention. I know, appreciate it may not be a council issue, but that's where we need to have a good education with young people and families wanting to purchase them. So it's great to see local businesses taking that stance. However, I think there's much more to do when it comes to the bigger chains and the internet, but more than happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to come back with a response on it?
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. I'll be brief. First of all, I really do appreciate all the positive comments of support for this notice of motion. And can I just briefly add, seeing as we are all community leaders in this chamber, if we can all help to work together to spread this message, to deter people from using these, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you to the members for their support.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded, so can I have a show of hands in support of the motion, please? Anybody against? Any abstentions? I'm happy to say that that was unanimous. Okay. To the first notice of motion, and I'd like, oh sorry, I thought somebody called me then. I'd like to call on Councillor Chris Evans, please.
Thank you, presiding member. So when it comes to the devolution of the Crown Estate to Wales, it's not an issue of inching closer to independence or expanding devolution. It's primarily an issue of funding. As we all know, Wales is one of the most economically deprived areas in Europe, particularly West Wales and the South Wales valleys. They're always regularly on lists of the bottom 10 areas in terms of development. While we were in the EU, we at least benefited from ERDF funding.
This would have been worth 1.404 billion for the period January 2021 to March 2025, according to Welsh Government figures. ERDF funding was designed to ensure the poorest parts of Europe were helped in their journey to become more affluent, reducing huge gaps in inequality. When we left the EU, Wales was promised that funding from the UK government would at minimum match the size of former EU funding. Unfortunately, this was a Boris promise. During the same January 2021 to March 2025 time period, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is due to deliver just 632 million, with 101 million of that already earmarked for an adult numeracy programme. This amounts to a shortfall of 772 million, representing a funding cut to Wales of just over 55% in this area alone. Unfortunately, there's no good news coming in terms of funding for Wales in the near future, as the current Prime Minister has made abundantly clear. The £22 billion black hole created by economic mismanagement at Westminster has led the current government to adopt the very same failed austerity policies as its predecessors, following the well-worn course ploughed by George Osborne and others since 2010. It's therefore absolutely imperative that Wales must take every opportunity it can to ensure as much funding as possible is received to help reduce the raging social inequality that exists. Crown Estate monies in Scotland, where it is devolved, netted the Scottish Government 103.6 million in 2023, and the Crown Estate as a whole is currently making record profits. 1.1 billion net for 23-24, an increase over the previous year of 658.1 million. The Crown Estate in Wales owns an estimated 65% of foreshores and riverbeds and over 50,000 acres of land. By putting us on a par with Scotland, this money earned in Wales would remain here, ensuring extra funding was available to reduce inequality. This policy can also claim to be the will of the people. 58% of Welsh people surveyed agreed with the policy to devolve the Crown Estate, with only 19% disagreeing. That's not a 52-48 split, it's a clear majority in favour. Historically, Wales has been a place to be plundered for its resources, while the people were left in poverty and the land was left despoiled. Since Brexit and the removal of the RDF safety net, this underfunding has skyrocketed. Devolving the Crown Estate to Wales will be just a small step to help redress historic imbalances, but what it will do is bring much needed breathing space for cash-starved Welsh councils and the Welsh Government. I hope you can support the motion and hopefully help us get some extra funding.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Could I have a seconder, please? Chris. Hey.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I fully support this notice of motion. I think the time has come that we say to the UK government, and we now have a change of government, so maybe with a bit of luck, they will support the Welsh devolution government, and as a result, we will get this funding. Why we've treated differently to Scotland, I don't know. We should all be treated the same. We all live in the same in the same islands, so I think it's only right and proper that we support this notice of motion.
Mr. Stewart.
Chair, yeah, just briefly, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Evans says, not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it. I would just say that I think this council's position for some time has been that we would like to see the devolution of the Crown Estates. Clearly, for our aspirations for things like the tidal lagoon to take place, the potential exploitation of offshore wind, all of those things are, in our opinion, best handled with the involvement of the Welsh Government. So we remain of that opinion and are happy to support.
The Black.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer Councillor Holly's question, the reason Scotland's been treated differently to Wales is because they were given control of the Crown Estates after the devolution referendum and as compensation for not being independent. In a sense, we haven't got that option. The Crown Estate here is worth about £600 million. The income is only about £8.7 million a year, which is still a significant amount of money. But of course, if we discovered oil in Ceredigion Bay, that could increase quite significantly. But I think the main point here is from what reports I've seen, there hasn't been any significant engagement between Welsh ministers and UK ministers on this particular issue. So I think it isn't just a question of outlining our support. I think it's a question of saying to the Welsh Government, you now need to step up your act and go and talk to members of the UK Government who are of the same party as you and show that you can make a difference, the fact you're in the same party, and actually deliver this devolution to Wales and get the responsibility and the income from this estate over here in Wales. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Presiding member, yeah, this was taken up by my good friend Nick Bourne, a former resident of Swansea, in the House of Lords recently, and saying that he was very keen that Wales got a fair deal. There are, as we've heard, different arrangements for Scotland, where any profits go into the Scottish Consolidated Fund, and I think that benefits Scotland. And I think, we believe that a similar approach should be applied in relation to Wales. We got a job. The last UK government didn't proceed with this, and the new UK government minister said, to quote, the government believe there is a greater benefit both for the people of Wales and the wider UK in retaining the Crown Estate's current form. So we have a job of work to do in this, but it can be done, but that needs to be promoted in that way.
Okay, going back to you, Councillor Evans, please sum up.
Just thank you all for your comments, and I can support the motion.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded, so can I have a show of hands in support of the motion, please? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Again, that's unanimous. Thank you. I've been asked to move the next notice of motion up, okay, because there's a bit of an issue with the
I just explained. I've asked the presiding member for us to deal with item 17 next. On item 16, I've circulated the Labour amendment earlier. I've attached the incorrect version, so that's being circulated shortly. We're probably going to have a break at 7 o'clock anyway for the 2-hour rule, and it'll give you a bit of time to read the actual amendment. I please accept my apologies for that. I'm about to email you the actual version now as well. I would, either way, I'd suggest that you give some time for you chance to read it, because it is my error, and I do apologise for that.
Okay, can I call on Councillor Lyndon Jones then, please?
Great, thank you, presiding member. Can I say it was disappointing that the new UK Labour government, in one of its first acts, had chosen to cut the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners across the UK. This decision will affect pensioners in Swansea. By removing the winter fuel allowance, it will leave 26,000 Swansea pensioners wondering whether to heat their homes this winter or put food on the table. This cut means a total of £8 million taken out of their pockets, so it will hurt the Swansea economy. To quote charity Age UK, cutting winter fuel payments this winter with virtually no notice and no compensatory measures to protect poor and vulnerable pensioners is the wrong policy. Millions of struggling pensioners won't receive up to £300 they rely on to pay their bills. We believe, this Age UK, this says, we believe as many as 2 million pensioners across the country who find paying their energy bills a real stretch will be seriously hit by this cut. Those on low incomes who miss out on pension credit, and those with high energy needs because of disability or illness. The government should halt the proposed change to the winter payment and think again. With this message, the Age UK online petition has reached nearly 500,000 people, and I urge everybody in this room to sign that petition, and I hope they support this motion as well.
Thank you, presiding member. I did suspect that this Labour Council would hijack the motion by blaming the previous UK Conservative government instead of backing 26,000 Swansea pensioners who are going to lose out this winter and feel the pinch. blaming this Conservative for mismanagement of money, but you forget that over the past few years, your government has enjoyed spending vast amounts of public money wired from the UK Conservative government, including and not limited to the City deal and the Shared Prosperity Fund. Far from reckless financial decisions, as you allude to in your amendment, you choose to ignore the fact that in the first 3 months of this year, the UK had the fastest growing economy out of the G7 countries. Let's see how we fare under this new Labour government. To try and understand how this would impact our pensioners locally, it isn't just about pensioners paying for their winter fuel. But with the loss of money, they will now choose between heating their homes and being in a position to socialise and have a coffee with friends. And this is the feedback we have had in Mumbles in our ward. We haven't even taken in the well-being of pensioners into consideration, let alone how it will affect our local economy. Instead of this Labour Council having a backbone and supporting our pensioners, you've chosen to toe the party line. But I'm sure pensioners would be pleased to know that your party found money behind the sofa to increase the train drivers' wages. I wonder which black hole they found that money from. Thank you.
Okay, I've been asked to move the amendment, so
Yeah, Chair, I was going to say I need to move the amendment because we need to debate the amendment prior to the yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Chair, for that. Interesting to hear from the Conservative members, and suddenly they seem to have found compassion for pensioners after 13 years of very cruel UK government actions. The reality is that the Labour government has been in for a number of days. Once they had full access to all of the accounts and situations across departments left by the outgoing UK government, who were, dramatically voted out with the biggest defeat in over 100 or so years, it became quite clear that there was a significant hole in the UK's public finances, which was known to the UK government ministers prior to the election. They simply did nothing about it. Indeed, as our amendment says, the Office for Budget Responsibility believed that they were not given the full facts and are currently conducting a review of that so that they can provide further information into the forthcoming UK government budget. That is an example of reckless mismanagement. The UK government, of course, went through several versions of itself in recent years under total chaos through several leaders, including Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Liz Truss, as we talked about earlier, did the very thing that you are now asking the UK Labour government to do. She took forward a budget which she had no way of funding, had not done the work on, did not publish the reports, and what happened? She crashed the UK economy. She drove interest rates up so that everybody's mortgage payments, who are on a variable rate, are now paying the price for that. Everybody then faced a cost of living crisis. These are dramatic things that the UK Tory government, when they were in power, forced upon the people of the UK. And it's not just pensioners that pay the price for that. Everybody does. Everybody does. But of course, what were they doing at the same time? During COVID, they had VIP lanes for their friends and their chums, where billions and billions of pounds were spent in ways that were not compliant with the rules, where people, it appears, gained access to ministers, access to public funds that will probably be subject to court action in due course. And we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds. We're talking about billions and billions, more than enough to pay for winter fuel payments, not just this winter, but every winter. That's the inheritance that the Labour UK government has had from its predecessor. But the Labour government, trying to be sensible, has done some things that the UK government didn't do. First of all, you talk about giving pay rises to train drivers as if that's some sinful action. These are servants who take people back and forth to work each day. How dare you demonise people who were key workers, who you were applauding during COVID just a few years ago, who you now believe don't deserve a pay rise? And it's not just the train drivers, it's the people who work in our NHS, the doctors, who the UK government failed to give a pay rise to, wouldn't even talk to. This UK Labour government has dealt with that immediately. To be fair to our public service workers, to be fair to our doctors and nurses, to make sure they get the rewards that they work for. That is the difference between the government. Now, if you believe that the government should overturn every bit of disastrous policy making by the Tory government over 13 years, that's not going to happen. We are not living in one of Peter Black's fiction novels. Okay? No, they're very good fiction novels. Almost as good as his fiction leaflets that we see going through the doors. But to be more serious, there are efforts which this council has taken part in for many years to encourage people to claim the benefits and support that they need. Over 880,000 eligible pensioners are currently missing out on an average of £3,900 a year. If that was claimed, that more than offsets the £300 that some pensioners won't receive as a result of the change. But to be clear, our motion, our amendment does call for the government to look at all of the avenues available to it, because of course it isn't just about the amount that you give out. It's about how you get taxed on that amount, how much of that amount stays with you. And again, we've had year after year of Tory chancellors freezing tax thresholds, manipulating the system so they give with one hand and take even more with the other hand, so that people do not gain. That is what has happened. So, look, it's only a matter of weeks since the government came to power. They are trying to deal with the mess that they inherited. It's a mess that was created by your party and Tory prime ministers who have dramatically crashed our economy time and time again, who have demonised our public services, undervalued our public services. This government is putting that right, and we should applaud them for trying to do so.
Can I have a seconder for the amendment, please? Okay. Anybody wishing? Yeah. I got Peter Black first, and I'll come back to you. Peter,
Yeah, great.
No, Peter.
Oh,
if I can bring Peter in first and come. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think I'm being regret not bringing some novels into sale now that Rob has been promoting them. The Age UK has estimated there's 11 million pensioners across the UK who will be affected by this particular change. Of that, about £2 million they estimate will struggle to pay their energy bills as a result of that. They're not getting pension credit. In Swansea, Western Gower, there's about 34,000 pensioners, and roughly about 6,500 of those will be in trouble because of this change because they're not getting pension credit. So clearly there needs to be some change. My concern is that this, and my concern is this amendment as well in many ways, is that what Rachel Reeves has done is a knee-jerk reaction to finding this £22 billion, which, you know, as the leader has quite rightly pointed out, has been inherited and has to be dealt with. But is this the right way to deal with it? Rachel Reeves likes to model herself on Gordon Brown. I think maybe a more apt comparison, maybe Philip Snowden, who in 1931, faced with the hunger marches and the recession, cut unemployment benefit by 10% to try to balance the books. You know, you do not penalise the poor and those who are worse off by trying to balance the books when you're in this position. There are many ways, in fact, this £22 billion could be met without having to cut the money, take the money away from pensioners. One, for example, they could have had an increased overdraft facility, as we did in March 2020, or the Bank of England and Treasury could have agreed to £22 billion of new quantitative easing. The government could have cancelled the quantitative tightening programme, which wholly unnecessarily sold £33 billion of gilts between April and June this year without a penny going to the government to fund spending. Or a new bond could have been issued for £22 billion. That would have been easy to do. The city would have bought it without batting an eyelid, and most especially if the quantitative tightening programme had been cancelled. They could have funded it by cutting the base rate by at least 2%, which the economy desperately needs. There are so many different ways to fund this £22 billion deficit without penalising poor pensioners and without penalising those who are struggling to make ends meet and are having to make that choice between heating or eating. And that is why I'm going to support the amendment, because I think it puts it into context, and because it shows that there isn't a simple solution to this. We do need to find a solution to those pensioners who are on the margin, who have found themselves not getting pensioner benefits, but will find themselves struggling to pay for their heating as a result of that, especially given the fact that energy bills are set to rise in October by £149 a year. My view is that Rachel Reeves has done completely the wrong thing. She's a knee-jerk reaction, and she should not have done that. But we need to put the pressure on her and on other MPs. The Resolution Foundation has got said a lot to say in this. Our MP now is a former chief executive of the Resolution Foundation. Why is he not speaking out on this? We need to put pressure on MPs to actually vote for the motion to put the government under pressure to change their mind on this. And that's why I will support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, great. Fine. Thank you, presiding member. When the leader mentioned the economy, gosh, he forgets going back to 2010 when the Conservative Party came to, or coalition came to power, as they found out there was no money left. But I think everything is about choices, and it's about, I believe pensioners should be a priority, and they should have been ahead of the game. And we have found out in a short period of time, the new government have really splashed the cash, and really pensioners should have been there at the front line getting some of that cash. So, if they want to find the money, very often Labour in the Senedd, whereas in Wales there's £110 million being taken from pensioners, and in Wales we find we are spending, or the Labour government in Wales are spending 120 million over a number of years on more politicians in the Senedd. Now I'd rather give the money to pensions and take that money away from politicians.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. Agree with Councillor Black earlier, saying the energy bills will obviously be increasing by £149 a year for the average person, even more obviously for those spending an increased amount of time at home, and those very people are our pensioners. We're talking here about one of society's most vulnerable groups who've worked hard all their lives, paid their taxes, and now in their later years are actually being penalised by just not having some of their very basic needs met. This is just really mean. Inevitably, this will add extra pressure to the already stretched NHS, which I'm sure a lot of you will already agree. Almost 500,000 people, and this is going up by the minute online, have signed an Age UK petition urging the government to please, as we are tonight, to think again about this and think about our parents and our grandparents who really deserve to be warm this winter. Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member. Just a point of clarity for the lead. I never actually said it was sinful to increase train drivers' wages. However, it depends where they found that money from in the black hole that they've said that they couldn't find it for the winter fuel. But I am glad to see one of your colleagues in York Central, the Labour MP there, who's actually challenging your government and asking what are they going to do about the winter fuel. And I think the difference is that perhaps between you and I, is that I don't mind not towing the party line all the time and being on the right side of the people. Thank you, presiding member.
Alison.
Yeah, speaking on behalf of the amendment, as individuals, we represent the people in our wards and have a duty to speak. Oh, sorry. Okay. As individuals, we represent the people in our wards and have a duty to speak out to support them. We know universal benefits have a cost, as it says on the tin, that everyone is included, even the king. So unfortunately, to do means tested benefits often takes up to about 60% of the actual budget to be, by the time you do the means test. So therefore, we prefer universal when you weigh it up like that, and we often end up, when we do the means testing, like your pension credit that people have talked about tonight, like you see often, and certainly in the ward I represent, many people are just over the line, and therefore they're not entitled to a whole heap of things because they're just over and they really are in poverty. There's been many mistakes made by previous governments, and I do call upon this Labour government to not go down the rabbit hole where others have gone before, and that as a local authority, you know, we see the serious consequences for older people, and it is falling to us as the local authority to try and plug these gaps and to try and support people out there, because you know, we certainly don't want any ill health, any deaths, anything. We are there, all the teams around the council, working flat out over the summer, going into the winter now, to try and help people. So I support the amendment, because we're all, you know, we're all in agreement that we don't want this to happen.
So Dirk.
Thank you, Presiding Member. It's just a point of clarity, really, to pick up on what Councillor Jones said. The outgoing Labour government in 2010 had a total debt compared to GDP of around 40% following a global financial crisis. The GDP rate, and when the Conservatives left, was over double that amount, £2,600 billion. So this is ridiculous levels of borrowing, unprecedented borrowing over time. Just a point of clarity to add to what Councillor Jones said.
Okay, I can't see anybody else indicating. Councillor Stewart, do you want to come back in and sum up, please?
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. Again, I won't repeat all of the points I made earlier. I think it's quite clear that, you know, I'm sure the Tories sitting in the chamber here would like everything to have started in July when the government changed, but the reality is their party were in power and created the mess that we are now having to clean up, and the government are having to clean up. Again, you know, Councillor Black, grateful for his input as always, but, you know, all governments have to make choices. When you were part of the coalition government and your party was propping up the Tories as part of that coalition, one of the things that you would promise constantly again was not to do things on student loans. And that was ditched as part of one of the first actions of the coalition government. I'm sure it was in the fact of, and I remember the explanations at the time around that you were having to take difficult choices. The point is, when you're in government, you do have to do things sometimes that you don't wish to do, that would not be on your list to do. But the reality is here, given the level of borrowing that and debt that this government have inherited, given the fact that the previous Prime Minister crashed the economy and drove up people's household bills, drove up inflation, left such a mess behind, why would any government then take the same approach and try and ignore the reality that's before them and take decisions that are not based on fact and not based on the reality around them? One of the things that the Blair government was extremely successful at doing was ensuring that the foundations of the economy were extremely strong. That is the approach of this Labour government. And when Brown and Blair did that, and when the Labour government at the time did that, it allowed growth to succeed then over many years. And that's why all of the social programme of the Labour government from the 90s to the 2000s was able to achieve so much in terms of reducing child poverty, so much in terms of increasing living standards, the increase in terms of the economy of the UK, how well we were doing as a country compared to where we are now. And I'm sorry, I think, you know, over the last, especially the last 7 or so years, through COVID, where terrible decisions were made, where the taxpayers' reserves were essentially handed out through VIP channels to people who had connections with the Tory party. There is a lot of investigations that are going to follow from that, and I do hope that this government is successful in recovering billions of pounds that should never have been passed out to companies related to the Tory party. That is an absolute scandal. And remember, it's all very well the people sitting over there, you know, finding discomfort in what the government are now having to do. But if their party had not acted so recklessly during COVID, in the way in which they spent money, then there would be more money now for this government to be able to use support people, including pensioners. In terms of the point that Francesca made, Councillor O'Brien made, apologies. Again, I think that the point here is you can either choose to reward public service workers for the job that they do. I mean, train drivers, nurses, doctors, teachers have all been through the cost of living crisis, have all seen the rampant inflation erode the cost of their salaries. So the decision by the UK government to make offers to those workers to give them a fairer wage is absolutely to be applauded. That is the right thing to do, because if you cannot get to work and you rely on a train and the train is on strike, that does not help you. If you cannot deliver a health service, treat people who are unwell, that does not help. So again, fixing those core problems early days will help people get on with the jobs in the health service and people get on with getting people back and forth to work. I'm sure there's lots more to come. And again, we will deal with the budget when we know what that says in October. But for now, 50 odd days into this Labour government, it is a taking stock phase. And again, when we get to the budget, there may well be announcements that are made by the government that we were not expecting, that may take into account some of the things that we've debated tonight. And again, that is why we're making the amendment we're making, because it is very well for the Tory party to put forward an amendment that seems to start in July, but we have 13 years of reckless economic damage to repair as a party and as a government. So with that, Chair, I move the amendment as we've placed this evening.
It has been seconded, yeah? Yeah. Okay, it's been moved and seconded then, so I'm going to vote on the amendment. So can I have a show of hands in favour of the amendment, please?
I think everybody knows what it means, but if I could just point out that in paragraph 3 of the amendment, in the second line, it has the word expect. I think it means extent.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote then. All in favour of the amendment, please? With the correction, okay. Okay, anybody against? Any abstentions? Right, so the substantive motion has fallen and the amendment has been passed. Okay, it's voted. Thank you. Before we move on to the next notice of motion, I'm going to propose we have a break. 10 minutes, is that okay?
We've amended the motion as submitted. We've amended the motion as submitted and accepted the amendment. That now becomes a substantive motion, which itself now has to be voted on.
So I got to read that. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Ask if there's any more amendments.
Right, what am I going to read?
Yeah. Oh, Janice, was just
I'm
going to read it.
Yeah, it needs to be read through.
Yeah.
Yeah, will do.
Which I can't. Where's the change?
I've made it there.
Okay. Who's going to read the amendment?
So just to comply with those standing orders, the motion, the new substantive motion, then I can read it out in its entirety, and then you can, well, you can dispense that. That's what it asks to do. This council notes with concern the 22 billion black hole in the UK public finances. It is clear this was created by the previous Conservative government's economic mismanagement and catastrophic policy decisions. The council notes the reckless actions taken by successive Tory governments, but specifically the Truss and Johnson governments, which destabilised the UK economy and contributed to the current financial black hole and cost of living crisis. This council notes the damning statement issued by the Office for Budget Responsibility that it had not been made aware of the extent of overspends and that it is now carrying out an investigation. This council welcomes the announcement by the new Labour UK government of the £421 million Housing Support Fund, which will create a direct consequential for Wales. This council also welcomes the new government's commitment to the pension triple lock, which will very likely increase pensions by at least £1,000 over the next 5 years. We also welcome the new government's commitment to increase the uptake of pension credit. This is something this council has done for many years. This council notes the previous Tory governments did very little to encourage the 880,000 eligible pensioners across the UK to claim pension credit worth an average of £3,900. We also note the decision decisions by the previous government to continually freeze tax thresholds, meaning more tax was paid by everyone, including pensioners, because thresholds did not keep pace with inflation. We recognise that the disastrous financial position inherited by the new UK Labour government has forced the new UK government to take immediate action, including cancelling capital schemes and changing the winter fuel payment from a universal payment to a targeted payment. The change means many pensioners not receiving winter fuel payments this winter. This council urges the new UK government to reinstate the winter fuel payments in full to support Swansea pensioners, or to take other actions like those listed above to support pensioners once the UK's financial situation allows.
Yeah. Okay, so can I have a vote in favour of the amendment, please? Oh, the substantive. Sorry, substantive. Sorry. Okay. It's as amended, yeah. Okay, anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried then. And so before the next notice motion, we'll have a 10-minute break if that's okay. All right.